Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brenda Nogales. I work for Highest Pennsylvania, a nonprofit organization here in Philadelphia that provides services, legal services, and social services to immigrants and refugees in our region. I will be co-hosting this presentation with Nadja Helm, a supervising attorney from Justice at Work. She will introduce herself in a few minutes. Before she does, I just want to let you know that this presentation will be recorded. The recording of the presentation and the slides for this webinar will be shared after the presentation with all of you. Please feel free to share that video, the information with other members in your community, with friends, family, anyone who might need or benefit from the information that will be provided today. If you have any questions today, we ask you to please use the Q&A feature at the bottom. Do not post any questions in the chat. We want to have that clear in case we want to share some information with you. Please use the Q&A feature to post any questions that you might have. I will be reading some of the questions after every section that will be presented. Now, without furthermore, I want to introduce you to our presenter today, Nadja.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadja Helm. I'm the supervising attorney for immigration at Justice at Work, Pennsylvania. We have offices in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, but we provide statewide outreach, education, and legal representation. Our legal representation we provide in both employment and immigration services, and we provide those services regardless of immigration status. I want to thank all of you for attending this training today. As we all know, this is a time of increased law enforcement attention and action against immigrants in the United States. I am so grateful that you are taking the time to learn about your rights, especially your rights when interacting with law enforcement. At the start, I do want to make clear that the recommendations in this presentation do not replace legal advice. And I would always recommend consulting with an immigration expert for personalized guidance based on your own immigration history, criminal history, and family situation. In today's training, what I hope you will learn is what you need to know and what to do when encountering immigration officers, the police, or the FBI. We're going to go over 12 things for you and your family to remember in any situation. How to make an emergency plan for your family. What emergency contact information you should have with you at all times. What questions to ask if a loved one calls you from immigration detention or police custody. And how to protect yourself and your coworkers in a raid on your workplace. I sincerely hope that you will never need this information, but it is always best to be informed and prepared. So you have rights regardless of your immigration status. Everyone in the US has certain rights under the Constitution. It is important for you to know and understand those rights to be able to protect yourself and your family. Regardless of your immigration status, you are entitled to fair treatment under the law, and you cannot be discriminated against based on immigration status. You have the right to due process or fair legal proceedings. You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to answer questions from immigration officials. And you have the right to privacy. Immigration officials cannot search your home or belongings without a valid warrant. And we are going to go into that in a lot more detail during this presentation. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is what we refer to as a whole as immigration. So DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, has 3 separate immigration agencies. ICE is like the immigration police. They're in charge of enforcement of immigration laws. So they're responsible for investigation, removal or deportation, and also detention of immigrants in the United States. I will be referring to them as ICE throughout the presentation. ICE also has attorneys who represent DHS in immigration court. So CBP is Customs and Border Patrol, and those are the folks that enforce immigration laws within 100 miles of the border. They conduct checkpoints, and they're present at the border and in border cities, as well as airports and seaports. And then we have USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And that's the office that processes immigration applications and petitions that are not in immigration court. So if you're applying for TPS or a U visa or a green card outside of the immigration court process, it is USCIS who is deciding on whether or not to grant that application. So the Fourth Amendment is kind of like the amendment that we want to be talking about in this presentation, and it protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. So we all have Fourth Amendment rights under the Constitution, regardless of immigration status. If CBP or ICE violate these protections, it could help your immigration case if you're detained by them. That's why it's really important to document any encounters with ICE or CBP. And that means writing down what happened, taking pictures of any judicial search warrant that they may have given you, writing down names of officers if you have them, and writing down the names of any witnesses that are present in the encounter with ICE or the police or CBP. So this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Know your rights at all times and don't wait and be prepared. So it is particularly important to know when you are at particular risk for detention or deportation. So those that need to be extra prepared are people who are undocumented, so without any legal status in the United States, anyone with a criminal history, anyone here on parole, or anyone who has a prior deportation or removal order. This information is not entitled to be, to scare you, but it is important to understand your own level of risk and your rights to best protect you and your family. We'll be talking a lot about, I'll be referring to the Know Your Rights cards often during this presentation. Hopefully, some of you already have those cards in your possession. If you don't, I would encourage you to scan this QR code or visit Clinic Legal Services to download and print your own Know Your Rights card. This card is intended to help you remember and express your rights during a raid or other interaction with law enforcement. It can be very scary and overwhelming to have an interaction with law enforcement. And if you freeze or you can't think of what to say, or someone doesn't speak English and is having a harder time communicating, this card can be particularly helpful to present to law enforcement. By the end of this presentation, you'll probably be sick of me saying a lot of the things that are on this card. So you have the right to remain silent. You should never provide information about your immigration status in the United States, and always say out loud if you wish to remain silent, or show the officer your Know Your Rights card. I wanted to pause here and just see if there's any questions before moving on.
We don't have any questions so far.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say that the link that Nadja just shared, you can find information, Know Your Right information is there in multiple languages. It's not just English. So if you're looking for Know Your Rights cards for someone who speaks Spanish, French, Haitian Creole, that could be a good place to go. There's other places too where you can find that information, and we'll share that at the end as well.
Thanks so much, Brenda. So we're going to take some time to talk about your rights in different places and go through kind of step by step what to do if you are in a situation where there's law enforcement. So the first place is your home. And to enter your home, immigration officers need either a valid warrant or your permission. Do not open the door. Opening the door could mean that you are giving permission to officers to enter your home. Just the mere opening, even if it's a crack, can mean permission to enter. And you never want to have someone think that you're giving them permission to enter unless you've seen a valid warrant. A warrant does not mean that you have to answer any questions. If immigration officers or the police start asking you questions and you wish to remain silent, you should say out loud, "I wish to remain silent," or show them your the Know Your Rights card that we just discussed. If officers are present at your door, always ask for identification. It's possible that the officers may try to trick, frighten, or intimidate you into opening your door. You should always look through a window or if to see the identification of the officer. Always ask the officials if they have a judicial search warrant. If they do not have a warrant, they do not have the right to enter your home, and you can ask them to leave. If the officials have a warrant, you have the right to see it. You can ask them to slide the warrant under your door or put it up to your window. And remember, even for a warrant, do not open the door. We're going to go over in the next page what a judicial search warrant, what a valid search warrant looks like. There are different types of warrants, and what to do will depend on what type of warrant that you're shown. Each warrant needs to have certain information, and if it doesn't have that information, it is not valid. So this is an example of a valid search warrant. You will see that it has the name of a court on top. It doesn't say DHS or ICE at the top. It has the name of a court. It is signed by a judge at the bottom, and it provides an address and information about what areas will be searched. If you are presented with a warrant that has all of these things, that does mean that the police or ICE or whoever it is does have permission, does have the right to search in the areas named in that search warrant. So a valid search warrant, as we just said, must be signed by a judge, must contain the address of the home to be searched, must describe the area to be searched. If officers enter your home, please say, "I do not consent to you searching my home." If you're in a place where it is safe to speak out loud, if you're not in public right now, I would encourage you to say along with me, "I do not consent to you searching my home." A lot of these things can be very difficult to say in the moment. I would encourage you to practice with friends and family. "I wish to remain silent. I wish to exercise my right to remain silent. I do not consent to this search. I do not consent to you searching my home." A valid arrest warrant, that means that the police or ICE or any law enforcement official actually has something signed by a judge that names a person who is to be arrested, and it needs to describe that person as well. If someone is within your home or you are listed on a valid arrest warrant, we recommend that that person goes outside to make sure that the other people inside the home are not searched and are not detained. So this is an ICE warrant. An ICE warrant is not a judicial warrant. An ICE warrant does not give an ICE agent or any officer the right to enter your home. You will see that at the top, it lists the Department of Homeland Security, and it says warrant for arrest of alien. This is not a judicial warrant. It is signed at the bottom by an ICE agent instead of by a judge. ICE will try to use these warrants to enter someone's home or to search, and they are not valid. So ICE officers are known to use some tricks and some lies to trick people, to get them to come outside their homes or open their homes, to get people to give certain information about immigration status or, even criminal history. So here are some things to be aware of. ICE agents may wear vests that say police, and they may not mention that they're immigration officers. This can trick people into believing they're dealing with local law enforcement and not immigration. ICE agents may say that they just want to talk. They may claim that they only need to ask a few questions or verify information, but in reality, they are often there to make an arrest. As we discussed, ICE often shows documents that look official, but are not real judicial warrants. Only a warrant signed by a judge gives them permission to enter a home without consent. ICE can also pretend to be someone else. They've been known to claim they're delivering a package or looking for someone different, or even conducting an investigation that is unrelated to immigration. These are all tricks that they're using to try to make an arrest or make multiple arrests. ICE may ask someone who opens a door to provide identification. They will then use that information to kind of confirm that person's identity and proceed with an arrest. And they've even been known to claim a car accident or a missing person or some sort of emergency situation to get someone to leave their home and to come outside. And then finally, they may say that they need help identifying like a neighbor or confirming an address in order to, check package delivery. So all of these things are things to watch out for. It may sound paranoid, but these are things that actually do happen. And we know that ICE now has quotas that they are trying to reach to detain and arrest as many people as possible. So always be on the lookout for these tricks and lies. If ICE officers do enter your home, inform them immediately if there are children, elderly, or sick people in the house. You should say, "I do not consent to this search." Should pay attention and write down as soon as they leave everywhere that an officer searched and exactly what happened. Pay very close attention to everything that happens while officers are in your home. And ICE is required to, well, they must ask for consent in a language that residents understand when feasible. So for Spanish-speaking targets, ICE must bring a Spanish-speaking officer to request consent to enter, consent to search, or consent to search. For non-Spanish languages, ICE needs to make reasonable efforts to provide someone who is, to provide an officer proficient in the language. It's unclear whether providing an interpretation like remotely by video is quote unquote feasible in ICE's eyes. Indigenous languages, if interpreters for a particular Indigenous language are widely available, it may be feasible for ICE to use one. So we've reviewed what happens at your home and what to do when officers come to your home. Brenda, have there been any questions?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. We have Isa asked if we can stop, if all the resources on the slides are available in one place. Yes, at the end, we have a link to Highest Pennsylvania that has all of these resources in their webpage, and that link is going to be shared in the presentation later on. There is another question that asks if there's anything people should know that may be construed as a waiver of the right to remain silent, even after giving the card.
Can you ask that question again? I'm not sure I fully understand what they're asking.
Let me see. Is there any... If whoever asked that question, can you specify the information you want to know? And then we have one final question, which is, are you required to provide ICE agents with your identification card if they knock on your door?
No, you are not required to provide identification or your name when ICE knocks on your door. If they have a valid search warrant, they may be able to obtain that information, or if you are placed under arrest, you may choose to provide your identification or your name. And we'll go over that a little bit more when we start talking about what happens in the street and what happens in detention specifically. But for knocking on your door, absolutely not. That is included in your right to remain silent.
There is one last question regarding interpretation. Do you know if ICE provides if they provide sign language interpretation?
I have no idea. I don't know the answer to that question.
I think it has to be if feasible is the word that it's important to keep in mind. However, in situations like that, it will depend of what happened during the encounter, and if they didn't take all the steps necessary to provide interpretation, that can help during immigration proceedings as well. That's why it's very important that, as Nat just said it earlier, to try to write down everything that took place during your encounter with law enforcement, because that can help you later on during your case.
Feasibility of the interpreter may also depend on whether they knew in advance that the person that they were targeting needs a sign language interpreter.
And one more question, and then we can move on. The question earlier, it says that if someone answers a question from ICE after giving them the Know Your Rights card, is that a waiver of the right to remain silent?
It's not a waiver of the right to remain silent. I would repeat after that, I wish to remain silent. I'm exercising my right to remain silent. If someone does answer a question, I would recommend that if you are exercising your right to remain silent, you continue, you do not answer anything and you do not state anything. But if so, I would just reassert your wish to exercise your right to remain silent. I'm going to move on, and we will have some time to ask questions again in a few minutes. I'll pause again. So we've moved from the house and we are on the street or in a public area. Do not run if you see immigration officers or the police approaching you. This will give them the idea that you have something to hide and may cause an arrest or detention when one might not have taken place without the person running. Just like at home, if you're stopped on the street or in a public area, you have the right to remain silent and not answer questions. In general, an officer needs a warrant to arrest you. And in some situations, you could be arrested if the officer has evidence that you don't have legal status or that you committed a crime. There may be situations also where an officer can search to make sure you're not carrying weapons or other illegal materials, and you should never resist that type of inspection. So what do you do? Before saying anything, including your name, ask, am I free to go? If the officer says that you are free to go, walk away slowly. If you say, am I free to go? And they say no, don't walk away. You can ask, am I under arrest? If they say no, walk away slowly. If you are under arrest, do not try to leave. In some states, the law says that you need to tell the police your name if they ask, but Pennsylvania is not one of those states. So if you don't So in Pennsylvania, you don't need to provide your name or identification unless you are detained or placed under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, even if you're arrested. You do not need, we would advise that you do not provide any information about your immigration status, where you were born, or how and when you entered the United States. Don't show any documents from your home country, and say out loud if you wish to remain silent or show the officers your Know Your Rights card. If the officer searches you, arrests or detains you, remain calm. Don't resist or fight. If they search you, say, "I do not consent to this search." Again, this can be incredibly difficult in the moment, but try to remember, I do not consent to this search. At school, so K through 12 schools are often closed campuses, and some areas are private spaces. Colleges and universities tend to have more public access. If ICE and CBP, if they do not have a judicial warrant, they cannot enter the non-public areas without consent. Most schools will have visitor policies that apply to the public. So it's kind of school policies on whether ICE and CBP can get entry and how. So often a superintendent or a legal counsel or someone assigned by the school will ask to see warrants and check to see if those warrants are judicial warrants that can be used to enter the school. There is some concern about drop-off and pickup areas that may be more vulnerable as they are likely public spaces. Places of worship. In the past, these were considered places where ICE and CBP officers were not going to enter or try to make any arrests or detention. That is no longer the case under this administration, and they have said that they will conduct searches and arrests in those places. So places of worship are generally open to the public. There are some areas that are private spaces. And again, there's no entry into those private spaces without a judicial warrant. And we would hope that a place of worship kind of has someone designated to authorize entry and review judicial search warrants, and also have an established protocol for refusing consent to enter. A hospital is public and private. Waiting rooms and parking garages and things like that are public spaces, whereas exam rooms, medical record areas, offices are private. And ICE cannot enter those private areas without a judicial warrant. We always look for, visually separate treatment areas from public spaces to ensure that it's very clear where it's private and where officers cannot enter. And do remember that you don't have to disclose your immigration status in order to receive medical care. We have heard, in the last administration and this one, that there are some workplaces that are vulnerable to raids or targeted enforcement. If law enforcement is coming to your workplace, you should work with your coworkers to make an emergency plan and have it in place in the event of a raid. The employer should be the person speaking with officers in the event the employer is not present, or if the employer gives permission to the officers to enter. There should be a person chosen to speak with officers in a raid to ask for identification and to look at a warrant. The person designated should read the warrant very carefully to determine if it's valid. And then if officers do enter your workplace, You have the right to remain silent. You do not have to provide any information about your immigration status or where you were born. Don't show any documents from your home country. And I just told you you'd get sick of this. Say out loud if you wish to remain silent, or show the officers your Know Your Rights card. If the officer searches you or detains you or arrests you, don't fight back, but also state that you do not consent to the search. And this is just kind of a workplace checklist to go through. If you're at a workplace, you can all talk together about what you will do in the event that ICE shows up, or if there's some sort of larger raid. And also the private spaces in the workplace, I would recommend that those are marked as employees only if they're not already marked as such. So there are different laws that apply when you are stopped in your car as compared to being stopped on the street. So if you're being pulled over, if you're being stopped in a car, it's important to pull the car over and turn it off. Put the overhead lights on in the car and place hands on the steering wheel where the officer can see them. You need to follow all the instructions, and that does include providing your license, registration, and proof of insurance when asked for it. If you do not have a license or registration, never provide false documents and do not lie. If the officer asks to search your car, say no, I do not consent to a search. There are situations where the officer can search your car without your consent and without a warrant. But you should be writing down everything that happens in that encounter afterwards. And if they search your car without consent, that also can be something that helps you in the event of being placed in removal proceedings. You continue to have the right to remain silent, and in your car, you do need to provide your license and registration, but you can exercise your right to remain silent and not give them any other information about you or your immigration status. If you are in another person's car or another person's home, again, just like I said about the public street or being, out in public, don't run. That can lead to an arrest or deportation when previously that wasn't a risk. If you are in another person's home, do not open their door. Same as for your own home. Even if it's not your home, that can give officers permission to enter. You continue to have the same rights to remain silent. And again, don't provide any information or any immigration documents. So CBP operates checkpoints within 100 miles of the US border. If you are stopped at a checkpoint, don't run. And you're required to follow CBP's instructions. So all drivers are stopped at CBP checkpoints, and CBP can ask about immigration status, request citizenship documents, and inspect the car's exterior or outside of the car without cause. CBP cannot ask unrelated questions if there's no violation of law suspected. They can't hold you for an extended time, and they cannot search inside the car or belongings without some sort of reasonable cause, some cause to believe that something unlawful has happened. You continue to have the right to remain silent, but do not provide false documents.
Nadja, before we move on, we have a few questions in the Q&A.
Okay.
And I also want to say that knowing information about what could happen if you're stopped by CBP is important, because Pennsylvania has cities that are within 100 miles of the border. So CBP could be enforcing immigration laws in those cities. I know Erie is one of the cities that is within 100 miles from the border, along with other cities. So that information is also helpful to know. We have several questions in the Q&A. Due to time constraints, we won't be able to answer all of those questions, but I'll select a couple of questions. So one of the questions says, if someone is living in the United States with removal orders already, is a judicial warrant required?
Yes, a judicial warrant is always required to enter a private space. I think maybe you're asking about the judicial arrest warrant. The judicial arrest warrant, again, is required when someone is in a private space, but somebody can be arrested by ICE if they're in public or come out of a home. If ICE chooses to arrest them, they do not at that time need a warrant stating that person's name. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, Naja. We have several other questions. One of them has to do with sensitive locations. They're asking if now shelters are no longer protected.
In the same way that all these other areas that we've talked about, shelters do not have their own special protection any longer. But again, there may be spaces that are considered private living spaces versus public spaces. So if it's a place where individuals are living and it's not accessible to the general public, that will be considered a private space, and they cannot simply enter that space without a judicial warrant. But more public spaces within a shelter will be accessible, and there's nothing that makes us believe that these will be any more protected than other public spaces. And I do think that some of this will depend on the individual ICE offices. Some ICE offices are going to be going into places of worship and shelters and maybe be hanging out outside schools, whereas other local offices may not do that as much. And I think some of these things are really dependent on individual officers and specific offices and locations.
And once again, I apologize if we cannot answer all the questions in the Q&A. We have limited time to continue with the information, but the links that you're seeing throughout the presentation will take you to additional resources that have more information than what we're providing during the presentation. They have videos also available if you want to watch some of those videos. So hopefully that will help answer some of your questions.
And there is so much information. There are so many things that we want you to know about your rights. And I'm going through a lot of information today and doing it quickly to provide everyone with as much information as possible. But as Brenda said, I would highly recommend exploring the various links to go read more about your rights, especially if you have particular questions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what to do if you are in jail or placed in police custody. Arrests, charges, and convictions can affect your immigration status. So if you are at risk of deportation, to the extent possible, you should avoid contact with the police. Again, that's those who are undocumented, those with a criminal history from the past, anyone on parole, or people with prior deportation orders. You do still have the right to remain silent. Being arrested or detained by the police does not mean you have to answer their questions. You should request an attorney, and one will be provided to you. That is different from immigration court, where you will not have an immigration representative provided for you by the state. But for criminal criminal proceedings, you will be provided with an attorney. You have the right to refuse to sign anything before speaking with your attorney, and you should not discuss your immigration information with anyone other than your attorney while you're with the police. This includes where you were born, how and when you came to the United States, and say out loud if you wish to remain silent, or show your Know Your Rights cards. This is particularly important because in some cases, the police may decide to contact immigration when you're detained by the police. So if they have information about you lacking documentation, or being in parole status, having a prior deportation order, they can share that with ICE and let immigration know that you are in custody so that you can be handed over to immigration. And then when you do speak to an attorney, it's essential to tell them your immigration status and any criminal history you may have. If you are held in immigration detention, the first thing to do is request a phone call so that you can call your emergency contacts. In one of the next few pages, we will have information about everything that you should be memorizing so that you can make the phone calls that you need to if you are detained by immigration. We would also recommend calling your consulate for assistance. Again, don't provide anyone with information other than your attorney or accredited representative, any information about your immigration status, and say out loud if you wish to remain silent or show your Know Your Rights card. Anything that you say can be used against you. So anything like, I'm from this country and I'm afraid to go back, please don't send me back. Or I'm going to apply for asylum. Anything about your immigration status, especially lacking status, should not be mentioned because it can be used against you if you go by immigration or the immigration court. Request a copy of your notice to appear and any other documents in your case. A notice to appear is a really important document if you're being placed in removal proceedings before the court. It has information about the charges against you and information about when you need to appear in court. You may not, someone who's detained is not always held in detention for court. So it's very important to have that document to know when you need to appear in court. Always request to be released on bond. That means that you're requesting to be released until your hearing. And then only a US citizen or someone with a green card can post that bond for you. If you believe that a family member may be detained by ICE, there is a ICE online detainee locator system that allows you to search for that person, either using their A number, where they're from, or their full name and date of birth. There can be some lag time between when someone is arrested or detained and when their information comes up on this online locator. So if you don't see someone's name and location immediately, but you do believe that they're being detained by immigration, definitely continue to kind of search everyone, every maybe even few hours, or at least every day to see if you can find out where they're being held. If someone calls you from immigration, from detention or police custody, try to ask them some or all of these questions. Knowing about whether they need medical attention is super important. If you need to get in touch with anyone and say, my loved one needs medical attention. It is important to know whether someone's in immigration custody versus police custody, where they are, whether any papers have been given, especially papers about a removal order or upcoming court. and finding out whether they've spoken to their attorney or accredited representative. And if not, a loved one or even a friend can contact someone's immigration representative or attorney and say, this person has been detained by ICE and here's where they're being held. And the attorney can try to get in contact with that person while they're in custody. You can also remind the person to remember their rights while they're in the situation. Are there any questions before I move on to expedited removal?
No, so far, no questions.
Okay.
And if we have time at the end, we'll try to answer previous questions that were posted.
Okay, thank you. Expedited removal has recently, under the new administration, been expanded a lot. Expedited removal means that immigration can remove someone from the country or deport someone from the country without going through the process of immigration court. Expedited removal can be used anywhere in the United States and against any undocumented person who didn't enter the country with a visa or on parole, or cannot prove that they've been in the US continuously for 2 years before the arrest. So what to do if you're first arrested or, ICE is trying to detain you? Silence first, but people should be carrying with them, collecting and carrying with them evidence of 2 or more years in the United States. That can include pay stubs, receipt notices, but also things like school records and medical records and even a gym membership. Being able to prove and carry around proof of lawful entry is incredibly important to fight expedited removal, as well as proof of a pending application. If you show, like, I am eligible to have some sort of lawful status here in the United States, and I'm just waiting for the government to make a decision, that can help prevent expedited removal. Also, proof that someone is in removal proceedings. Being in removal proceedings protects someone against expedited removal unless and until DHS tries to get those removal proceedings terminated. Again, expedited removal goes around so that removal proceedings and proceedings before the court aren't necessary and don't happen. If someone's already in court, already in those removal proceedings, ICE cannot use expedited removal against them unless they actually terminate those proceedings in court. And if someone is afraid to return to their home country, they should always state that fear. That can also help to protect someone against being removed without going into court, and they may be entitled to some form of protection or at least a specific type of interview or even a court case before they can be removed. So stating a fear of return to your home country, if a fear exists, is important. The Laken-Riley Act is a new law which requires immigration detention of people of non-citizens who are charged with, convicted of, or even admit to committing certain types of offenses. This has been in the news quite a bit because what's called mandatory detention, or someone being required to be detained and held without bond, used to be much narrower, and now it includes theft-related crimes. So offenses like shoplifting and other forms of theft, any act of violence or aggression at police officers or other law enforcement, and then crimes resulting in death or serious bodily injury. And some of those people would have been, if someone committed a crime resulting in death or serious bodily injury, even before the Laken-Riley Act, it was likely that they would have been detained if they came into contact with law enforcement. So it's important to remember that each situation is different, but these are kind of, the 12 things that we recommend you and your family members know to help you be prepared in any situation. I do realize that this slide goes from 5 to 8. The next slide has 6 and 7 and 9 through 12. So anything you say can be used against you. We've talked about that. We've talked about you have the right to remain silent. If you wish to remain silent, say it out loud or show that card. That can protect you in many situations where you don't know what else to do. Just, I want to remain silent, or here's this card. It'll tell you what you need to know. You should always be carrying any US identification that you have and copies of immigration documents, but do not carry false documents or identification documents from another country. Again, having those sort of documents, handing over those sort of documents, especially something that says you're a resident of another country, or you're from another country, is providing evidence that you are not in the United States lawfully, or that you came from another country and you're not a citizen. And then, as I said previously, never run if you're in a raid of some kind, or if you're approached by officers. Never lie. Never lie to officers. It will not help you in the long run. You do have the right to speak with an attorney. As I said, if you are in police custody, you may be provided with an attorney if you do not already have one. And then you should speak with your immigration attorney or representative. And in the next pages, we have ways that you can find an immigration representative if you do not already have one. Never physically fight back if you're being arrested or detained. You do have the right to refuse to sign anything before speaking with an attorney. And if you are in police custody or detention, don't talk to anyone about your immigration status, your immigration history, or your criminal history. And then if you're questioned, if you're in a raid, or if you witness any type of a raid or arrest, write down everything that happened in as much detail as possible as soon as it's safe to do so, and then tell your attorney what happened, or any local support groups that you know of. Are there any questions before we move on to how to find help?
Yes, there are a couple questions. Let me see if there's a lot of questions. I'm trying to get all the way to the end. I apologize for that. I think there were a couple questions about the Lincoln Riley Act, which you covered. And then somebody asked if the expedited removal was expanded due to the Lincoln Riley Act specifically.
No, expedited removal was in one of the or in a lot of the first executive orders issued by the Trump administration. So it was not connected to the Lincoln Riley Act.
Okay, another question asks if you are a citizen, if they stop you and ask for your ID, and if you provide them with your ID, can they keep it?
No. No, they should not be keeping your identification. If something like that were to happen, if this was like immigration for some reason, kept your US ID, I would actually probably call the police. And also let an organization like the ACLU know about that, and probably an attorney as well. So I'll move a little more quickly through some of these slides. This slide provides information on how you can find an attorney in your area. If you call like a nonprofit like Justice at Work or HIAS, and those organizations are not able to provide you with legal representation, most of those organizations will have a list of kind of trusted private immigration attorneys, and you can always ask for that referral list. Okay, avoiding scams and notarios. So unfortunately, in times like these, when immigration services are in high demand, there are people who will take advantage of people's needs and even desperation. So notarios or fraudsters will make promises about representation in court or filing applications for someone, and then take that person's money without actually providing services or providing very bad legal services. So things to look out for, or false promises. Anyone who promises a quick or easy green card or employment authorization document, work permit. Anyone who makes like guarantees about a work permit or a visa. Anyone who says there's no risk or consequence to applying for something, that's pretty much never true. There's always going to be some level of risk in letting the US government know that you don't have like any sort of lawful, especially lawful permanent residence. There's going to be a risk if that application were to be denied. And then anyone who says that they have some sort of special influence with immigration officers, it's generally not true. So be aware of these things, and contact someone else. If anything, if you get that feeling, everyone knows that feeling. If you get that feeling that this person is not a true attorney or is someone who is going to take your money and run, trust that feeling and find someone else. So preparing yourself and your family. So someone touched on this in the questions, but if you are a US citizen, you're not required to carry ID, but proof of citizenship may prevent identification, especially if you feel like you are a person who may be profiled by the police or immigration as a non-citizen. You should probably be carrying your US passport or some sort of proof of citizenship. Green card holders should be carrying their green card, their lawful permanent resident card, and also keep copies, both electronically and in paper, in a safe location. If you have a work permit, you should be carrying that work permit or what's called an EAD with you, and also keep those copies saved securely somewhere. Pending immigration applications. So if you have applied for something, but you don't have an answer yet, you may have something like a bona fide determination or have been provided something called deferred action. You should carry documents with you that state that. Also USCIS receipt notices. If you've applied for something and your attorney got a receipt showing that the government received your application, that can be helpful. Generally, you wouldn't want to present these documents immediately upon being stopped by immigration or the police, because that is showing them that you're applying for status, which means you don't have status. You don't have, your green card or a US passport. So this is really, if you are, about to be detained, or if they say anything about expedited removal, providing something like a receipt notice, again, like I said in a former slide, that can show, like, wait, don't arrest me, don't detain me, don't try to deport me. I have already applied for something. Sometimes that can work, sometimes it doesn't mean anything to the officers. So, but it really is kind of a wait and see, and not immediately to hand over those sorts of documents, because that is a kind of admission about status or lack thereof.
Naja, I just want to add one more thing to this.
Yes.
Every case is different. So we ask those who are watching this presentation to speak with their attorneys, because what you should be carrying with you or not carrying with you will depend on how long you have been in the United States, what applications you have pending or not, whether or not your proceedings or not. So there's a lot of factors that can influence what will be safe for you to have to carry with you if you are stopped by immigration. Because as Naja said, if you have a receipt notice that says you have an application pending, that can help ICE show that your alienage, that you're not a US citizen or a permanent resident, and that can speed up the process for them to start removals against you. So please speak with your attorneys to make sure what will be safe for you to have with you if you are stopped by law enforcement, specifically ICE.
Thank you, Brenda. Appreciate that. And for purposes of expedited removal, do carry proof of being in the United States for at least 2 years if you have it. Leases, rental agreements, bills and school records, things like those. To show that, you know, you're not subject to this expedited removal. And again, those should not have anything about your immigration status on there. Because of cell phones, we often don't memorize people's phone numbers, but I am going to ask you to take the time to memorize a few phone numbers in case you don't have your phone or in case your phone is confiscated or taken by law enforcement. Try to memorize the phone number of your attorney or representative, your consulate, and any family members who may be able to help you if you're detained. If you have an A number, which is the number that's on the 9-digit number that's on any immigration documents you may have, try to memorize your A number. Remember that when you entered the United States and what status you entered in, and your current immigration status and any criminal history. This is important for your own knowledge, but not to be sharing with the police or any immigration officer who arrests you or tries to detain you. It is helpful to have a family emergency plan. You know, many families have some members who are not lawful permanent residents or citizens or have some sort of status, and then those who are citizens or have some form of status. Having an emergency list of contacts is extremely helpful to get help if you need it. Preparing essential documents, so making copies of immigration paperwork, as well as like social security cards, birth and marriage certificates, things like that. Doing some childcare planning, so designating someone who can be a caregiver, and ensuring that that person has any important information about children, and even discussing signing legal documents like a power of attorney, so that someone can care for children in the event that a parent is removed from the United States and no longer present to provide care. If any children are born in the US, it's essential that they have passports, and try to obtain one if you have children who are US citizens who have not received their passports. It is extremely helpful to set aside funds in case someone is detained. This can be to help post bond or to pay for an attorney if one is necessary. And having someone like identifying a US citizen or a permanent resident who is willing to post bond if needed, because someone without status cannot post a bond for someone in immigration detention. And just going through with family and friends the rights that we've talked about in this presentation, and you know, really acting out what you might do. What will you do if ICE knocks on the door, and making sure that everyone knows not to answer, everyone knows not to open the door, and everyone knows how to look at a warrant. People know what to do if they're stopped on the street. Everything that we've talked about today, preparing your family as well, is extremely important. So this is about minimizing your online presence, and I would recommend that you do this right away. Do not post identifying information on social media, especially about you or your family's immigration status. Also, not like your location. I'm in this place right now. If there's for any reason that you may be targeted by police or ICE, they will be able to find you through social media accounts, and we would never want something like that to happen. Disabling the Face ID or fingerprint access on your phone. There have been situations where immigration will kind of hold someone's phone up to their face to get access to their phone, or put their finger on the access. So disabling those will make it harder for anyone to get into your phone without you specifically entering the password. There's no need to unlock your phone for and you're not required to open and access your phone when speaking to immigration. Limit what is saved on your phone. Don't share passwords or allow government officials to inspect your phone, and don't store important documents on your phone. And if you do, kind of make sure they're under password protection. And I would say do this right away, don't wait. This page is specifically, the next few pages are specifically for Philadelphia residents. So going to these links, Crisol and Esperanza Immigration Legal Services can help in finding immigration services and events in the community, as well as legal representation and other services. So you can explore those links and QR codes after this presentation. And then this is just helpful to know that all Philadelphia residents can get language assistance, including in emergencies. And you can look at the City of Philadelphia website or contact 311 for more information about that and getting language access. So the Philadelphia Commission on Human Rights, their phone number, as well as online reporting and the hotline are available here. If you are a victim of a hate crime, particularly based on nationality, that should be reported. That is unlawful. Again, as we said at the beginning, just because someone is, regardless of someone's immigration status, everyone has rights. There are certain rights to be protected, and you do have the right to live a life free of hate crimes and other crimes against you. So please do keep this information. These are other national hotline numbers. But if you are in immediate danger, you can always think about calling 911, but these are other hotlines as well. And then, as Brenda said earlier, there's this link to the highest Know Your Rights, and this will have, I think, pretty much all the information that we covered today. So it's available and at your fingerprints to review or to share with others. And I would encourage you to share this with those you know and love.
Thank you so much.
I know we're a little bit over. I'm willing to kind of stay and answer questions if people want to stay and have more questions.
Yes, and once again, I want to thank Naja for doing the presentation. I hope all the information provided is helpful. As she said it, we have a Pennsylvania Know Your Rights package. You can see it on the screen. And a link to this entire package with all the resources that were provided here is on the Highest Pennsylvania website. We invite you to look into this package. At the end of the package, we have a list of legal resources in Pennsylvania, organizations that can provide assistance. And we also have a list of other resources, videos, flyers that can also be helpful for you to learn more about what are your rights and how to assert them if you come in contact with law enforcement. As a reminder, we'll have a Know Your Rights presentation tomorrow in Spanish at noon, and we'll have a Know Your Rights presentation on Thursday also at noon in French. We are working on scheduling a Know Your Rights presentation in the next few days in Haitian Creole. We'll be sending that information out to all of you as soon as it becomes available. If anyone wants to stay, we'll stop the recording and we'll try to answer some of the questions that were posted on the Q&A. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you all so much.